Welcome to Biocomputational Max. Today is Thursday, May 14th, 2026, and I want to talk about an important topic that touches many aspects of global development, and that's Techno-Feudalism, as Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek minister, called it in his book, What Killed Capitalism. In that book, he argues several major points. First, the idea is that public is reduced to cloud serfs, and data is being owned by big corporations. The second one is that these entities not merely record and document our preferences, but influence them. His remedy is twofold: social control over the algorithm, as well as the political influence to secure it. I'll discuss my amendments later, but let's talk first about Yanis's proposal. He, for example, describes Amazon as not just the big marketplace that connects buyers and sellers. It is an algorithm that matches them and influences them in ways that they not always understand. And he says cloud capital is unlike industry with robots or telephone systems and electricity grids. It's not just there to produce, but to modify your behavior. So this is a new form of capital, a produced means of behavior modification. Great phrase. So it not only will predict, but direct your future purpose, as well as perhaps political ideas. So let's cover the two remedies that he is proposing in that book very briefly. First is, as I mentioned, social control over algorithm. And he puts it, the question is, who knows what about us and who owns this information? How can organized democratic society can control of the algorithms in the interest of many? This is an admirable, socialist sort of idea. And I'll explain my issue of that. It's not just a moniker. Second observation is that political problems have political solutions, and the challenge is getting organized in terms of conversion of collective interest into collective action. At this point, I completely agree, and that's why I'm making these videos in part, and why there's a company behind this, and in fact, a whole movement that I'm trying to lay out in these videos, kind of like chapters. So, as I said, I'll discuss the alternative at the end of the video, but first let me agree with the nature of the problem. We are living in a rentier economy that's going digital. Former rentier economy, the original feudalism, was, of course, the landlord. Now, your printer and your car seat warmers may require a subscription. Many new businesses are trying to hoist this model on us of rent, where ownership was perfectly sufficient. Of course, software was the gateway drug to that. We opened the door because of automatic updates and reasonable pricing, but in fact, the costs oftentimes are higher than what people would be willing to pay as a fee for several years of service. And of course, as I'm pointing out, for a number of products, this model is a stretch, to put it mildly. Now, let me briefly go into a little bit of a related topic of companies using their monopoly power. It's not always data related, but an important example here is Apple, with its 30% App Store commissions on digital transactions, and its intense legal scrutiny and regulatory oversight that's basically the company is facing both in the US and in the EU. In the United States, the Supreme Court has ruled against Apple in a case of Epic Games versus Apple. There is also a class action lawsuit about the magnitude of these fees and, as I mentioned, EU regulation. Getting ahead of many of these challenges, Apple has started to reduce its rentier fees to 15% for small developers, but major challenges remain. So I kind of want to throw this example into the mix, although predominantly I'm focusing on the data, not the algorithms. But here we're talking about a bit of both. And in fact, the actual bottleneck that Apple has is, of course, hardware. But other companies such as Google and Meta have similar bottlenecks in pure advertising. Of course, Amazon has its Amazon Web Services. So there are lots of big tech companies that are collecting massive rent with some cause, but some companies are trying to enter this, whether they have cause to or not. Speaking of big tech companies, and connected to, of course, the techno-feudalism is the ongoing major AI race, where companies like OpenAI and Anthropic have essentially scraped the entire internet without compensation. There are internal memos revealing that they and others have essentially acknowledged that they were going this essentially disrespectful this route of disrespecting privacy rights, and now they're facing trillions of dollars, literally, in terms of lawsuits. It's a long stretch on that magnitude, but these lawsuits can still have significant impact, like Musk versus Sam Altman lawsuit may have. So what connects all of these instances, though, is there is data in the ether that's deposited for various purposes, whether it's pictures or our Google search preferences. The companies make use of it not just for our benefits, and similarly, your medical data is being often resold in anonymized fashion. But that is a separate topic I'll touch upon later. The race, to come back to AI, is now to AGI, which it seems the tech bros believe will allow them to dominate the world in terms of data as well as physical technology, like Musk's robot and Sam Altman's global iris scanning startup. But this control of data is certainly key to control of society and money. So let's focus on the relative power of corporations versus states. Trump has brought a number of billionaires to his inauguration. Some of them, like Zuckerberg, were not at all helpful to his loss in 2020. And yet they were there. And now Musk, who has also said some things about Trump, his prominence in Epstein files, for example. Despite that, he was along for the ride on Air Force One now to visit China and be treated essentially as part of that diplomatic entourage. So corporations have power that increasingly rivals the state. They serve us, but would rather rule us. And of course, the same goes for politicians. They're all trying to aggregate power, which is why it's so easy to get aligned. Which corporations are trying to rule us by controlling data? The big names. They are facing actually some scrutiny both externally and internally. And I'm talking about the likes of Palantir. Considering Trump's business focus on real estate, it's not surprising that he is embracing rentier economy and working closely with these mega corporations. Although Zuckerberg spent some 400 million Zuckerbucks in Wisconsin to try to defeat Trump in 2020. But now they're all aligned, worshiping the golden statue of Trump and money and techno-feudalism. In some conversation recently with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Professor Sachs has observed that the exorbitant privilege of the dollar is ending. That is to say, it's losing reserve currency status. And despite Trump's apparent efforts to maintain the strength of the dollar, in fact, he is weakening it through tariffs and other weaponization. And this is something that has come from a recent conversation between Yanis Varoufakis and Professor Jeffrey Sachs, that the size of the US contribution relative to the global economy is shrinking. The dollar has been weaponized and abused. The SWIFT system is slow and technologically outdated, comparing to BRICS Pay and some other systems that are based on more modern transaction technologies, including blockchain. Yanis has also observed that China is perhaps the only country in the world besides the United States that has cloud capital and finance to rival the United States, and he sees this competition between them as not being just geopolitical, but in terms of this techno-feudal state. Jeffrey Sachs has observed that the dollar is being cannibalized by crypto, which Trump has championed from even before his inauguration with Trump Coin. This is one of the multiple ways in which Trump actually undermines the dollar, which he supposedly wants to strengthen. And in fact, Russian officials stated that they believe the US plans to convert its debt to cryptocurrency, stablecoin essentially, and then to devalue it. We will see how that pans out. Let me connect this topic of data control and techno-feudalism to a reductionist view of people, which is controlling and ultimately misanthropic, that is espoused in political circles and some economic circles, specifically the World Economic Forum, which of course straddles the two. And it's largely an expression of European latent desire for global hegemony. In 2016, Noah Harari has written essentially that humanity will be divided between a super elite of improved humans and a mass of quote unquote useless people, and that power is in the hands of those who control the algorithms. That it was a decade ago. And he's not challenging it. He wants to get ahead of this rolling stone to be in power. He returned to that theme in an interview next year, in which he said that humankind is on the verge of the greatest revolution ever. The combination of machine learning and biotechnology will give humankind the ability to start engineering new life forms, cyborgs, superhumans, and AI. And basically, for 4 billion years, evolution was limited by natural selection in the organic realm. Now we are much more advanced. We're outside of the realm of viruses and dinosaurs. And the power is with inorganic life shaped by intelligent design. And he's obviously gleefully embracing that, as long as he is part of the ruling elite, I would dare say. And he says that AI and bioengineering will not be shared equally by all humans. Rather, it will probably be monopolized by a small number of countries. It presents a seemingly an opportunity for essentially two most important countries to develop these powers, USA and China. And that's what I was talking about earlier, that all of those techno bros are traveling to China and are essentially making the proposal to it, which China is not at the moment able to refuse. Don't fight us over Taiwan, just stop supporting Iran, listen to our rules, and you can prosper with us. Of course, Xi Jinping says that he wants China to prosper and is quite compliant. But he, to me, seems to be the last and the main dish of this banquet. Now, whether or not we believe in this goal of more advanced form of humans with a few winners, we can see the impact of AI and some robotics, as well as the politics that's basically embracing this Ubermen, and allowing a tiny majority to control, allowing a tiny elite to control the global majority like never before. Not in the Second World War, not any time before or since could people dream of such a complete domination. Now, as I mentioned, Yuval Harari is closely associated with the World Economic Forum as a frequent speaker, contributor, and attendee, including a recent one in 2026. He represents many of the beliefs of that we are globalists, who, as I mentioned, I think have these latent imperialist ambitions that actually diverge from some of the US attitudes. But coming back to Harari, he has it exactly backwards. He essentially says that humans are just data processing algorithms that can be manipulated, and therefore, quote, data will destroy human freedom. Is he really that naive, or is he lying to us? I think the answer is unfortunately both. He is a true believer in this misanthropic nonsense, but also wants to become a part of this ruling elite, like some Dr. Strangelove, and is therefore lying to the public to teach it to fear and love the most potent weapon. AI and propaganda, for which it's really quite perfect. His latest book on this topic is Homo Deus, How Data Will Destroy Human Freedom. And Bill Gates has written a glowing review of it. So you're welcome to read both. The links will be in the description. Harari identifies a new religion with his ideology, something he calls dataism, accurately reflected by the age of surveillance capitalism, the fight for human future and the new frontier of power. That describes a vast accumulation of wealth and power where predictors about our behavior are bought and sold, and production of goods and services is subordinated to means of behavioral modification. The threat seems to have shifted from a big brother state to this insidious and ubiquitous digital architecture. So while Big Brother was centralized, this is decentralized surveillance capitalism. So here's the crucible of the unprecedented form of power marked by extreme concentration of knowledge free from democratic oversight. This is the criticism that Zuboff has described in her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which is a comprehensive and moving analysis of the threats to the 21st century. A controlled hive of connections that seduces with promises of certainty for maximum profit at the expense of every human value, freedom, democracy, as well as our future. What Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism, Harari calls dataism. Only instead of placing the blame for the obsession of data on the few Silicon Valley companies, Harari notes that the whole world should be invested into this new religion for willing participation. And this is reminiscent of Huxley's Brave New World. Harari envisages a society where the choice is between taking advantages of technology and retaining our sense of self and privacy. Now, as a parting reflection, and this is exemplary of his whole attitude, and I'll try to quote the three questions that Harari leaves us with. Are all organisms algorithms, as biological sciences tell us? In the face of consciousness decoupling from intelligence, what value does consciousness have? And finally, the third question, how will we live in a world where algorithms are better than ourselves? Is there more to life than algorithms and decision making? So to summarize, in Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, Yuval Harari envisions this future where artificial intelligence and algorithms surpass human intelligence, and thereby shifting the central authority from human experience to dataism. He predicts that algorithm will know us better than we know ourselves, and we will face a fundamental transition from being independent decision makers to being essentially a useless underclass. Or we can merge with technology to become the upgraded Homo Deus. Not like the Uberman of the previous century at all. Interestingly enough, Sam Altman has a similar kind of view of the merge, as he calls it, between the biological humans and technology. Harari thus argues that humanism, which prioritizes human feelings and choices, will be replaced by dataism, a new belief system holding that the universe consists of data flows and that the value of any entity is determined by its contribution to data processing. What a misanthropic reductionist approach. It's quite remarkable, but as I've mentioned, he's been peddling it at WF for a decade, and the tech bros are definitely getting with the program. So now let me come back to my proposed resolution to escaping techno-feudalism. It's for us to move from cloud serfs to data owners. Let me elaborate. Yanis Varoufakis' proposed solution envisages social control algorithm and is idealistic, essentially, I would argue, in regard to social, technical, and business requirements for long-term stability that would attract people, as opposed to be a new enforced social economic contract, essentially a new form of socialism. His solution is too direct, socialistic, and ultimately, I believe, futile attempt to control the digital capital at its aggregate or bank level. Centralized capital, in my humble opinion, means centralized control and is thus antithetical to this distributed, pluralistic distribution of power of data owners. So a public corporation has many stakeholders, but a majority own very little and are thus making little difference because they're not organized, leaving it to institutions and a few ultra-wealthy individuals to control the direction of the business. A more democratic way to control this process is at the level of capital creation, in proportion to individual sharing of medical data, and essence of the medical data, with preserving privacy. That is the proposal that I'll be elaborating upon further. There's a reason why it's medical data as opposed to your pictures, because we're seeking to create a globally valuable database. And just like with water, there are certain properties that we can observe in the bulk that can be described as emergent properties that arise from intrinsic properties of individual molecules. For the currency gold that I am envisioning that will accompany this ownership of medical data based on digital collateral, and as I said, derived from a revenue sharing of medical data, we have a different level type of control. This is implicit determination of these extrinsic or macroscopic macroeconomic properties. Instead, we control the intrinsic microscopic or microeconomic properties, such as the creation and trade, which is essentially using blockchain tracking and also conversion between cryptocurrency and equity. But the important point is that algorithms remain proprietary for the sake of innovation investment. Public doesn't need to control the algorithm. They control the training data, which is theirs, as is the case with personal medical information. This is why I envision this as the starting point, because medical data is the largest valuable set of data, and also one where we can set the precedent of individuals controlling data and the algorithm being a form of a business and algorithms competing at the business level. In a couple previous videos, I've described the massive potential of healthcare data to create new value by sharing its mathematical essence while ensuring its privacy and enhancing fluidity of the system. You can see those links in the summary of the video. But to summarize this discussion of techno-feudalism, the proposed solution is to start to lay out foundation for public ownership of individual data and transition from the future of cloud serfs to data owners, which preserves the richness and complexity of human interactions and does not seek to reduce us to mere data, ripe for centralized algorithmic control. Instead, we embrace individual data ownership, starting with the most valuable and private information, medical data, which also empowers distributed democracy. But importantly, equally importantly, we serve the intrinsic humanity in all of us by serving human health and not just trying to pursue greater data usage and monetization. Like, share, and subscribe.